Hello, everybody. We're back. This is part two of An Elder Lady Has Accommodation Problems from this book, An Elderly Lady Up to No Good. It's written by Helene Thurston. She's written several books, a good author. But this is a very interesting story about an 88-year-old woman who has always lived in the same apartment, and a young girl moves downstairs. She's very rich, from a rich family, and she's got her eye on Maud's apartment. And this is not a good idea to cross Maud, but she's just about to learn that. Okay, and this is part two. If you want to hear the beginning of the story, just watch part one. Okay, I just left off where the young girl had just came up and introduced herself. Her name is Jasmine, and she brought her some champagne and was checking out her apartment, which Maud didn't like, and we're going to go from there. The champagne was really expensive brand, Champagne de Pompadour. When Maud looked it up on the internet, she saw that it cost 549 kroner at the state-owned liquor store. Ridiculous. Admittedly, Maud enjoyed the odd glass of genuine champagne from time to time, but she was happy with the brands that cost less than half that amount. The little tin of Russian caviar was also the real deal and probably cost as much as the champagne. Maud seriously doubted whether the other residents of the apartment block had been offered such expensive delicacies as Jasmine's housewarming party, or at Jasmine's housewarming party, which led her to conclude that Jasmine was trying to get into her good books. But why? Perhaps she was lonely and looking for friendship. Maud was an old woman, a good 40 years older than the social butterfly with artistic ambitions. They had nothing whatsoever in common. What did she want? Was she looking for a surrogate grandmother? After a little research online, Maud discovered that Jasmine's maternal grandmother was still alive. She seemed to be a lively and active person, and she was 2 years younger than Maud. It was obvious that both of Jasmine's parents came from wealthy families. Her father was now 76. When he eventually passed away, his new wife would inherit his money, together with Jasmine and her half-sister. The wife would probably be the main beneficiary, but Jasmine would be entitled to her legal share, which would no doubt be substantial. It's easy to criticize the patriarchy and the upper classes when you come from a privileged background and expect to inherit a fortune, Maud thought to herself, pulling a face. She had to fight the very basics for most of her life. She had been able to do quite a bit of traveling after Charlotte's death, but she was forced to take in 3 tenants in order to make ends meet. This had been possible because the apartment was so large and she hadn't been at home all that much while she was working. The last tenant had moved out 25 years ago when Maud retired. By that time, she had saved enough money to get by for the rest of her life. She had invested a small amount in long-term safe bonds. The income from this investment, together with her small pension, was enough for her simple needs. She also had plenty of money in the bank, which she used when she wanted to travel farther afield, and that money would see her through. There was no one to inherit from her after her death. It was clear from Maud's research that Jasmine wasn't looking for a surrogate grandmother. So what did she want? Maud thought about that farewell hug, the soft, warm, but there was nothing in Jasmine's blog to suggest that she was a lesbian. Quite the reverse. In spite of her frequently expressed hatred of women, she wrote on several occasions about fantastic one-night stands with young men. The younger the better, no one over 30 and preferably around 20. According to one entry, she thought men over 30 were smelly and boring. She warmly recommended brief relationships with younger men because they didn't involve any kind of commitment. They merely provoked an outlet for a woman's sexual desires, as she put it. There was there are female chauvinist pigs too, Maud thought. Now that's a new one on me. No, this had nothing to do with surrogate grannies or sex. So what was going on? Barely a week later, the doorbell rang again, loud and long. In Maud's world, it felt as if her visitor had only just left. With a sigh, she got up from her comfortable armchair and went out into the hallway. She had a feeling she knew who it was. A glance through the spy hole confirmed her suspicions, but still she opened the door. Mistake number 3. Hi there, Maud. I've made some pastries. I thought we could have coffee together. Do you have coffee? You do have coffee, don't you? I've just run out. Maud couldn't quite work out how it had happened, but suddenly Jasmine was standing in the apartment. She bounded off in the direction of the kitchen, leaving in her wake the seductive aroma of freshly baked vanilla pastries. With a sigh, Maud closed the front door. By the time she reached the kitchen, Jasmine was already filling up the coffee pot with water. The tin of coffee was beside her on the counter. She's taken that out of the top cupboard by the stove, Maud thought. With deft movements, Jasmine spooned the coffee powder into the Molita filter, chattering away at the same time. I mean, we're both alone, home alone all day. I'm alone by choice, of course, because I need peace and quiet in order to create. That's the hard part, coming up with good ideas. Realizing those ideals afterward isn't so much of a problem. Although I do work in large formats. My pictures measure several square feet, but of course I can hang those on the walls. Then again, I don't really have any wall space left. The sculptures and installations are even more difficult. That's not much room. The study is already too small. I publish pictures of my work on the internet and I have a blog. Do you know what that means? No? I can show you when you come down to my place. It's brilliant. I've sold several pieces through the blog, and I've got a big exhibition coming up in a few weeks. The private view is on October 15th. You will come, won't you? At that point, Jasmine had to pause for breath. She fixed her big eyes on Maud and tilted her head to one side. Her face might have been marked by the life she had led, but her eyes were an extraordinary shade of blue and almost innocent. Maud was confused and didn't really know what to say. Automatically, she reverted to a role of very old lady. Oh, I don't know, all those people. I don't usually go to that kind of thing, she said evasively. In that case, it's high time you did. I'll pick you up and we can go together in a cab, Jasmine said firmly. Excuse me. I don't want to see the trash you produce, Maud wanted to scream, but something held her back. Perhaps it was simply her good old-fashioned upbringing. Instead, she nodded feebly, which could have meant anything. Then it's all arranged, Jasmine said, interpreting the nod to suit herself. She rummaged through the kitchen cupboards and found coffee cups in the sugar bowl. Do you take milk? She asked. Maud shook her head wearily. Before she had time to react, Jasmine had opened the refrigerator and was poking around inside. Don't you have any milk? No. At last, Maud was beginning to recover from the intrusion, because that was exactly what it was, an intrusion into her calm, peaceful world where she had set the pace and rhythm of her day. No, she said again, just because it felt good to say no to this person. They had their coffee and pastries in Maud's small living room, which was where she spent most of her time since the space also functioned as her bedroom. The bathroom was on the other side of the hall. The truth was that Maud used no more than around 200 square feet of the huge apartment, which Jasmine pointed out after a while. Maud could feel the anger beginning to bubble inside her. Now she lived in her own apartment was of no concern. How she lived in her own apartment was of no concern to anyone else. She merely mumbled something unintelligible in response. Jasmine didn't appear to notice Maud's reserved attitude, but continued to prattle on. The fact is that the way we live in another is another thing we have in common. I need space for my art, so I live in two small rooms, plus the kitchen and bathroom, of course. Just like you, I use the rest of my apartment as a studio. And then, of course, there's the glassed in terrace. You really must come down and have a look. Everything is so clean and new. Once again Maud played the old lady, was slightly confused, and mumbled something into her cake, which was in a pleated case with doll's conditori printed on it. So much for being homemade. The pastries weren't homemade. When she was about to leave, Jasmine stopped just outside the door. She looked at Maud with an expression of deep concern and patted her gently on the cheek. "Isn't it a bit too much for you having to walk up all these stairs?" She pointed to the long staircase that led from the main floor to the elevator and Maud's apartment. "No," said Maud, and shut the door. Now, pretty soon coming up here, Maud gets a little bit too angry. She decides she's going to have to do something about this Jasmine. And that will be in part 3 of my story. So subscribe and come back here in just a little while and we'll finish the story. Okay? Thanks for listening.